Hi, Gretel from Sunny Meadows here. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about ranunculus saving because we've gotten a lot of questions. I know there's not a lot of resources out there about how to do it. Um, we're still figuring some of the things out as we go. So I know one of the biggest remarks that we got was kind of like maybe the plants weren't died back enough. Some of the beds we do pull out a little bit sooner than we would like, and that's just because of the real estate in the greenhouse being needing to be flipped for the next beds to be planted. Um, but this bed here is kind of an example of the level of it being died back, where the plants are starting to yellow. You know, these flowers were left because they have powdery mildew, and were not harvested. And so this is about when we would start to pull them back typically. We showed a little bit about the digging process. And so we've also gotten a lot of questions about whether or not we wash them. Sorry, hopefully you can hear me with the storm happening. So we do not wash our ranunculus corms for the same reason that we don't wash our dahlia tubers, and that is so that the dirt can kind of dry around them and all of those little root hairs can naturally kind of die back rather than washing them off and then getting a really quick drying. So when we're pulling them out of the ground, we do not get them wet, and they don't get wet through the whole rest of the process. Even when we are cleaning them and putting them in the root tumbler and dividing them and stuff, all of that is dry throughout the whole process. So they don't get wet again until we go to pre-sprout them, and then they'll get soaked and then dipped in a solution, either root shield or oxidate, to kind of help if there would be any disease pressure heading into the next year. That's when it gets addressed. So this is just more of an example. This is the last bed that we have to do. So I think it was maybe a couple weeks ago that we posted that we were digging the first part. So, you know, it's kind of a long process, and we call it the dahlia tubers of summer because it takes a long time to do all of the dividing and saving, but it's been worth it for us to be able to sell the corms. So here we are in all of the corms that we've dug from the greenhouse. Right now we keep them separated by a greenhouse, and for that reason of if a bed was dug too soon or dug too late or got too dry and the corms start to disintegrate or anything like that, we can track that through this whole process. So the different color tags are different different greenhouses that they came from, and that also lets us know how long were they in the ground from planting time to when they got ripped out. So this is where we are curing this year. Last year we did it in a greenhouse and it was a little bit too hot and dry. So they were in full sun and some of them really shriveled down. So in here, this is going to be there still is airflow, and we want them to kind of slowly dry out, and then we'll sort of deal with these. It's now June, so through the month of June and kind of the beginning of July before Lysianthus happens, the goal is to get all of these processed. So we won't know what we have for sale until we go through this whole process, because we need to see what we are storing, and quantities minus what we want to plant equals what's for sale. So it's kind of, again, why it's like dahlia tubers here. So this is just an example of a corm that is harvested dry with the dirt on, left to cure. And then we'll take these, put them through. We have a root washer, which we'll post more videos once we get to this process. We don't put any water, so it's kind of just like a root tumbler, like what you would use if you were growing carrots or beets or something. But with no water, we've adapted it and dug more holes, or drilled more holes in it. They get tumbled, and then they get divided, and then they get tumbled again, to try to get them as clean as possible. So something like this will get divided down. They are similar to tubers in that they need the crown. So once this dirt is off of here, it's a lot easier to see, but we will mostly hand separate them, just kind of pull them apart. The goal is not to get them down to like all little tiny ones. We want them to be at least a size like 3-4 centimeters, like what you would usually keep. Some people have asked about overwintering them in the ground and why not just leave them in the ground. We choose not to do that because it is expensive real estate and they don't overwinter very like predictably. You can have them, it will work. We even tried one year planting eucalyptus over top of them in the bed with the idea that like the eucalyptus would overwinter and we'd get the ranunculus blooms, but we just didn't get that many plants. Like it wasn't a full bed. So for us, it's worth it to like dig them up, know it's going to be a full bed and plant them again. Similar to the same reason why we don't overwinter a lot of things in the greenhouse, because we want to make sure that it's a full bed, especially if we're heating that space. So that's a little bit about the curing process. They will sit in here for 2 weeks through when we get to them. That's why it's important also for them not to be in a greenhouse in full sun where it's going to be too hot as far as the curing process goes. And then storing them, we're just storing them in some place that's warm and dry. So you don't want to store them in the basement if your basement gets wet. You don't want to store them in a cooler because people actually pre-sprout them that way. So it's more about if you have an attic, someplace that you would store like dried flowers, again, someplace that's not going to get moldy and someplace that's also not going to like fry them. So it just kind of depends on what your facilities are like. Spare bedroom, even if you don't have a barn like this, and figuring it out, and then you'll work towards what works for you. So we'll post another video as we get to the other steps of the process to continue to talk about this. And then our corms will be listed beginning of August is when the like corm launch will be. So between now and then is lots of cleaning and dividing and counting will happen in the process.